Before My Heart Gives Out by Kira 18, Aneo 3, Chapter 17, A Beautiful Day. Is that boy going to keep loitering around, or is he actually going to buy something? Mr. Yoshida's gruff voice sounded next to him. The man's irritated words fall short as Izuku detects the barely concealed amusement in his tone. It's been a couple days since his reunion with Bakugo. Since then, the boy has been coming to the store every morning, although he figures that the teen doesn't realize that Izuku knows he's there, given that Katsuki never actually says anything or tries to interact with him directly. Nonetheless, Midoriya feels the teen's eyes, following his every move, from the minute he steps into the room up until the moment he steps out. Scanning Izuku, observing him for any signs of something. Izuku isn't quite sure what. Maybe some kind of indication that Izuku is safe and healthy? He's honestly not sure. He tries his best to ignore it, though. If that's what Bakugo needs in order to move on and forget about him, then so be it. That doesn't mean he doesn't feel the slight pang in his heart every time the teen leaves without talking to him. Despite his determination to disregard the other boy's watchful gaze, an involuntary sigh of relief escapes him when the teen finally decides to leave, probably satisfied with whatever he saw today. With a soft click, the convenience store door slides shut behind him. Almost immediately, he can feel his body losing some of its gathered tension, and he allows himself to relax, to breathe. A suppressed caught fit finally bursts from his mouth as he frantically reaches for the box of tissue papers on the counter in front of him. Hissing at his throat, already scraped raw, paying with each wet cough that forces itself out of his abduct system. The morbid, familiar taste of copper once again rises to the surface, probably visible in the white tissue that resides in his grip. A dark, noticeable red, he imagines. He can feel Mr. Yoshi's eyes on him, but he finds himself more preoccupied with the breath he's trying to force out into his deprived lungs. After what feels like a lifetime, but can't be more than a few seconds, he breathes again. The episode, finally over. He stands there for a few more minutes afterwards, hands gripping the counter, knuckles white, as he supports his weight against the cold marble-like structure, not fully trusting his body to obey him just yet. When he feels like his legs aren't going to betray him, he straightens out, huffing lightly as he gets back to work, electing to ignore his boss' palpable worry. He really needed to see a doctor. He pushes through the rest of his shift, with only that in mind. It was going to be a long day. It's barely noon when Mr. Yoshida insists that he leaves early. A rough and impatient, "Go home, boy. You're scaring off the customers." The harsh words barely serve to conceal the underlying worry in the older man's voice, making it even harder for Izuku to protest. Patrol isn't an option at this point. Therefore, with no other reason for him to stall and avoid the impending confrontation, he makes his way to the hospital, limp stiff with tension as he climbs onto the correct bus, the one headed for his chosen destination. Dread pulls in his stomach as he gets closer and closer to the one place he's been avoiding for years now, the place that lingers at the back of his thoughts, reminding him of the time that had greatly affected him. White, sterile walls that had witnessed his life changing forever, his entire world spiraling out of control as a consequence. Choosing to avoid that particular train of thought, he plugged his headphones into his ears, electing to listen to any new messages he'd received from Shinsou that day. The first message he hears are what he usually gets from his friend at the time of the day: a greeting, a query of his whereabouts and well-being, the usual. However, what makes him pause is the boy's final message. It goes something like this: "Look, I know you don't like the whole meeting new people and getting attached thing, but I was wondering if you wanted to come with me and my friend's study group tonight. Our finals exams are coming up, and they decided to meet up at Yariozu's house. She's the class vice rep, and she's, like, really smart." Shinsou seems to catch himself before he can defect from the subject. Anyways, what I really meant to say is that it would be fun. We won't spend the entire time studying, and I don't know, I think you could use a change of pace, right? Meet some of my friends, maybe even help us with some of the subjects. I know you know most of the stuff already. I've seen the stack of books you keep in the warehouse. The teen chuckles, and Izuku can picture the grin that's definitely etched on the boy's features. I won't make you, but just give it some thought, okay? See you. The voice message ends with a click, and his phone declares their end. Humming in thought, he let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. He heard the intent in his friend's voice, and although Shinsou would never say it outright, Izuku knew that the teen has wanted to introduce him to his other friends for quite some time. Izuku's heart warms at the thought of his friend. Shinsou has come a long way from the closed-off boy he bumped into that day. It felt like a lifetime ago. At a time where things didn't seem so complicated. He's glad that Hitoshi managed to find some real friends. People who would care about him and take care of him. Maybe it's not that bad of an idea to meet them. Observe their interactions themselves? Making up his mind, he quickly sends the teen a confirmation, shoving his phone away and back into his pocket as the bus driver announces their arrival. His hands grip at his walking stick as he makes his way onto the pavement, extending his senses towards the destination until he's facing the desired building. He feels some curious glances shot his way as he makes his way through the lobby, but no one actively tries to stop him. Stepping into the front of the secretary's desk, he clears his throat to gain the attention of whoever is sitting on the other side. Can't you see I'm The woman starts, irritation evident in her tone, but stops abruptly as she finally lifts her head to look at him. Ah! She stumbles slightly with the rest of her sentence. What can I do to help with you? She asks politely, and Izuku wants to laugh at the obvious discomfort he's causing her. Rubbing the back of his neck brashly, he tries to get the interaction over with. He doesn't want to keep her any longer from whatever she was doing before his arrival. I, was wondering if I could meet with Dr. Hiro? I'm an old patient of his and... The woman, however, interrupts him before he could even finish his sentence. Look, kid, the doctor doesn't meet with anyone who walks in here and wants to. He's a very busy man, so you need to make an appointment. She states sternly, no trace of the previous stammering in her voice. I can probably fit you in for the 13th 2 months from now, otherwise, I can't. It was his turn to interrupt her now. I need to see him now, he says, trying to convey the urgency behind his words. He doesn't seem to be affected in the least. However, whatever protest she was about to voice out is cut off by a third voice, coming from a few paces behind him. It's okay. The kind and slightly familiar voice ensures. Vaguely, Izuku realizes that he hadn't perceived the person's approach, too focused on the woman in front of him. It seems the secretary hadn't noticed the new arrival either, if the way her breath hitches slightly is anything to go by. I have time to see Midoriya-san now, Karen. The man, Dr. Hiro, he concludes, with a start, steering Izuku towards the elevator with an arm lightly rested on his shoulder. It takes him a moment to replay the man's words in his mind. He immediately turns to inspect the doctor's form, trying to piece the man's presence with the vague one of his memories. You remember me? The phrase comes out of his mouth as more of a statement than an actual question. The doctor had referred to him by name. Contrary to general beliefs, I never forget my patients. The doctor answers simply, voice as firm and calm as he recalled it to be. Especially not one such as yours. Before he could even think of the meaning behind the man's words, the elevator dings, and Dr. Hiro is already walking out of it. Izuku scrambles to follow the man, walking stick, swiping across the ground to keep his presence. They walk down an empty hallway until they reach a room on the very end. The telling click and scrapes of the key reaches his ears, and they both step into what he presumes is the doctor's office. The man quickly ushers him forward, towards a patient's bed on the far side of the room. Sit, he urges, the man himself taking a seat on the stool opposite of Izuku. Now, first and foremost, I'm glad to see you, Midoriya-san. It's been, what, 3 years? 4, actually. His throat feels really dry as he says so, the looming time limit rearing its ugly head over him once more. Ah! Dr. Hero answers simply, clearly remembering the unspoken implication behind those numbers. Yes, time is a peculiar thing, isn't it? One can never get enough. The words hang heavily in the silence, the only sound being the soft whirl of a couple of machines cluttered in the corner of the room. I think you, of all people, know this to be true, he continues, not unkindly. His response catches in his throat, the words refusing to slip through his clenched teeth. Finally, he manages to mutter a few words. I'm not sure 4 years still stand. He tries slowly, hoping the doctor wouldn't ask him to repeat himself. He feels the man's stance change as he takes in the words. His voice is scrabbled when he responds. And why would you think that? Images rise before his eyes, flashes of memories, fresh and sharp as photographs, dizzy spells, coughing fits, random nosebleeds, and bone-deep tiredness. Just a feeling, he says, instead, glad he'd chosen to wear his tinted glasses today. The accessory, serving to hide whatever emotion, must have filtered through his eyes, as he recalled the instances. The doctor seems to notice anyways, though. His stance straightened once again, hard stumping against his pant legs as he seems to mull something over. I'll run some tests and see what we can find then. He coincides, finally, body already moving across the room to gather whatever equipment he needs. I don't have a lot of money, Izuku blurts out suddenly, knowing how expensive these kind of tests could be sometimes. For the test, I mean. He stammers, when he feels the questioning glance the doctor shoots him. I'll implore you not to worry about that, Midoriya-san. Nodding his head, hesitantly, not really understanding the doctor's motives, however electing not to look a gift horse in the mouth, he lets the man proceed. After a few minutes of work, the doctor steps back in front of Izuku, trailing a small cart next to him, a series of equipment stacked on top of moving structure. Please remove your shirt and lay down, Midoriya. Cursing himself internally for forgetting this part of the checkup, he instantly lifts his hoodie up, off his frame. A shiver involuntarily racks his body as the cold air hits his skin, his scars tingling slightly under the doctor's watchful gaze. Izuku doesn't want to imagine what the body must look like now. He accumulated somewhat of a list of battle wounds, injuries he's racked up over the years. However, instead of the anticipated interrogation he's expected to receive, the doctor only seems to nod once, resolutely, and begin the examination. A blood sample was taken for speedy testing, his lungs and heart examined along with multiple other tests, and a few hours later, Izuku gets to put his hoodie back on, happy with the familiar comfort it brings him now that he waits for the doctor's verdict. A ding resounds through the room as the computer alerts them of the incoming results. He can feel the man's frown from here, senses the unease spreading warily through the room. Midoriya, son. The man starts slowly, voice deliberately, even as he speaks. Have you been subjected to any kind of quirk recently? Any kind of treatment or medication? It takes a moment for him to register the question, and another to think about it. However, when he does, he can't help but suck in a sharp breath. Healing quirk, he says breathlessly. Recovery girl. I thought so. Hiro states grimly. Izuku can sense his fists clenched and unclenched from his place on the patient's chair. A heavy, almost loaded silence falls over them, as the doctor seems to gather his thoughts, enough to speak. However, probably sensing Izuku's growing anxiousness, Hiro explains. Am I right to assume that you already know the general aspects of Recovery Girl's quirk? Heal. he asked tentatively, waiting for Izuku's nod before continuing. I'm afraid that instead of healing you like any other person, Recovery's girl, Quirked, reacted differently to the chemicals already in your system. For the first time since the start of their interaction, the doctor looks hesitant, tired. By accelerating the healing rate of the injuries you had at the time, the quirk unintentionally kick-started the acceleration of another aspect of your condition. In other words, her quirk accelerated the chemical's effect on your body, speeding up the process and therefore nullifying the quirks that previously slowed down the chemicals. So the chemicals are no longer progressively slowing. Can you use the same quirks you used last time to slow down the process again? He hated how hopeful his voice sounded in his own ears. How naive. I'm afraid not. Most of the chemicals in your system have changed by now, adapted to your body, and integrated into your very own components. Slowing it down would only hurt you further. How long? Midoriya, how long? He repeats, mind feeling as if it had been plunged deep underwater, static ringing in his ears as he awaited the sentence, because that's exactly what it was, wasn't it? A death sentence. 7 months, 9 at best, Hiro said, voice strong and unwavering, elected to treat Izuku as an equal instead of a child he met all those years ago. Okay, he finds himself saying, finally, no emotion in his voice, as he moved to stand up, body strangely firm as he planted his feet on the ground, moving as if on autopilot. I have some medication here for the possible side effects you'll be experiencing. That is, if you haven't started already. They won't serve to change anything, but they will allow you to proceed with your life as usual. If not only to be more careful with the stamina limit, overexertion. The man says, with a surprising knowing look in his eyes, as he hands him a bag full of what he assumes is dimension medicine, followed shortly along with instructions on how to take them. Accepting the offered bag, he stops short of leaving. Thank you, he whispers lowly, and walks out, not paying enough attention to hear the doctor's muttering response. You're welcome, Shadow. Hiro has been working as a doctor for a very long time. However, in all his career, he's never met anyone like Izuku Midoriya. The boy had been dealt with a series of bad cards in his short life, a horrifying tragedy preceded by a life-altering condition, and a limited lifespan at that. He didn't make the connection at first, didn't tie the notorious Vigilante with the blind, quirkless orphan he treated all those years ago. People talk, and when you spent your days in a hospital, you tend to hear things. The tales of rescued victims aren't hard to come by. People whose lives had been rescued, saved, and changed forever by an obscured shadow who always seemed to appear at the right time, helping people without seeking any kind of retribution or credit. He heard more and more often people speak of his name, whispers of his look and his strengths, or his selfless sacrifice and endeavors. Yet he didn't make the connection until he encountered one particularly disturbed medic. The woman was a frequent visitor to the hospital, given the nature of her profession. In fact, they interacted many times in the past. However, on one particular night, she had been so distraught, rambling about the Vigilante and the strange information she had gotten through the use of her quirk. Young and dying, strange levels of chemical substances in his bloodstream. He didn't believe it at first. However, the more he paid attention to the Vigilante, things seemed to simply fall into place. The timeline, the orphanage reports he'd gathered, and finally, his general knowledge of his old patient. It all fit. A strange, tragic puzzle that he formed and gathered into place. A deep sense of honor and pride settled in his heart at the thought of the role he played in all of this. The aid, albeit quite small and unsubstantial, he'd given to the small hero. Somehow, without knowing it, the world had gained a precious hero. The question was, for how long? Waiting out of the hospital, A strange sense of unreality settled over him, as if he had been plagued into a state of complete numbness and unawareness. His mind was quiet, blank, almost serene as he walked, walking stick all but forgotten as he elected to just hold it in his hand, not bothering to actually use it. He felt strangely dissociated, as if his mind was somewhere far, far away from his body. He was somehow glad for it, glad for the barrier that blocked his mind from registering the storm of emotions that surely brewed inside the threshold he called his heart. Glad for the momentary escape he was being granted by his own cowardly subconscious. Contrary, his senses worked on overload. His brain, compensated in the absence of active emotions, for his body to move and act. He could hear the bustling crowds around him, moving on the street and pavements, getting on with their lives as if nothing was wrong. He could feel the light breeze that shifted and wailed through the air, an indication of perfect weather that adorned his particular day. The warmth of the settling sun in his skin as he lifted his head, staring without seeing in the sky above. It was funny, really, how despite his shadowing world, despite the raging emotion that threatened to overwhelm and drown him from the outside, it was still, truly, and honestly, a beautiful day. Despite the suffocating sense of anger that boiled down to his very heart, the unfairness of the world and the life he had been given, dealt with, the life that suddenly and abruptly came crashing down on him. A weight he had been carrying for so long suddenly felt heavier than ever. His legs, trembling, as if he had been thrusted onto the edge of a cliff, a mountain, where all he could possibly do is look down and brace himself for the impending, unavoidable fall. An involuntary laugh erupted from his throat without his consent. The sound was strange, and so very wrong to his ears, cold and humorless. He was borderline hysterical now, his outbursts gaining more than a few glares and lingering glances by onlookers as he let himself go for once in his life. He laughed, and soon enough, his laugh turned into choked sobs, tears uncontrollably leaking from his unseeing eyes, as he noted once again the particular beauty of the day. The beauty he'd only get to see for a limited time, because that was the truth, wasn't it? Despite his shattering universe, the wind still whistled, the sun still shone on the horizon, gleaming brightly and perfectly, and the world kept spinning. The beautiful world that would, in time, go on without him. So, how are we? How are we doing? Are we all good? I'm not. Oh my god. I had to take a break when the doctor said that he only had like 7 months, 9 at best. And like I started sobbing, like actually fucking sobbing. And I'm still like at the point where like I'm crying, but like I'm about to start fucking bawling. And alright, I want to go with my notes in Bakugo. I find it very endearing that he's, looking out for Izuku, and he's like trying to make sure that Izuku is okay and safe and healthy. But little does he know, he's not. Oh my god. Okay. Fucking damn it. Jesus Christ. It's just the fact that this is so bittersweet because it's like, okay, Recovery Girl is the reason this is happening, but at the same time, if Recovery Girl didn't heal him, he would have died that day. Quite literally, it's either he died that day, or he dies in 7-9 months. He was fucking fucked. And it was all because of that stain kill, and it's just... I'm very emotional right now. I'm gonna take a nice break, and I'm gonna search up the most fluffiest fic with no hurt comfort / more comfort, because I really hope you guys are taking care of yourselves, because I know this was a very emotional chapter, and it was for me. I want to talk about the end. The 7 to 9 months at best. Oh god, how is Hitoshi gonna fucking break? Oh my god, and Izuku was finally being like, hey, maybe it's good to see some of his friends. Like, I feel like this is probably gonna put Izuku back mentally, like he's gonna start pushing people away again. Because like in the past, he's like, okay, I have 4 years with Hitoshi, right? 4 years, and it's now like, okay, I'm gonna leave him in 7-9 months. What if I just leave him now? And it's just, it hurts. It really does hurt. And I'm trying so hard not to break out sobbing right now. I'm wrecked. I'm actually wrecked. And it's just, it's fucked. Ugh. Kira 18, I think what makes this chapter worse is the way Kira 18 is writing, especially towards the end. Your writing style really fucking sells it. And, you have a really good writing style, and I hate you for it because it's hurting so much more than it should. Because it's one thing to have a very tragic death. It's another thing when it's written so well that you're just sitting there and you're just like, fucking shit, it hurts 100%. Like if this was like, don't get me wrong, I'd still be hurt if it was like the same type of like situation, stuff like that, except it was written differently with a different style and a different writing, and it was like written a little more poorly. I would still be in pain, but it wouldn't be to the point where I'm like sobbing and like he's not even dead yet and I'm already mourning. And I can't even imagine what it's like for them, like having to mourn someone who's still here, you know, because that's what happens with terminal illnesses. And god, okay, I'm gonna take a very well-deserved break and relax a little bit before I record my next one, because my voice is fucking wrecked. I can't record the next one. I'm not even crying anymore. This is just my voice wrecked after I sob. My voice becomes like fucking horrible when I sob, so I'm gonna have to take like a 30-40 minute break before I record again. So, I hope you guys are taking care of yourselves, and as always, my main job is make sure to eat, sleep, drink water, take your meds. Have a wonderful day or night. Link to my Discord server and socials are down in the description. Subscribe to see more of my content, and thank you so much for watching.